Most people open their Google Ads account, they see a wall of numbers, and they just start guessing or getting overwhelmed. See your clicks, your impressions, your conversions, your cost per lead, your click-through rate, and you're not really sure what any of them mean or what they're trying to tell you. But your Google Ads data isn't just a report card, it's a diagnostic tool. And once you know how to read those numbers, it'll tell you whether you've got a targeting problem, an ad copy problem, a landing page problem, a tracking problem. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to analyze your Google Ads performance in a simple way, and how to know which parts of your campaign are actually worth changing so that you can stop guessing and start making decisions based on what the data is really trying to tell you. So the first thing you want to do before you start clicking around in the account is you want to get really clear on the goal of the campaign. And I know that sounds obvious, but it's so easy to get pulled in 15 different directions by all of the numbers in there. So you can look at impressions, you can look at clicks, you can look at your click-through rate, and it can get overwhelming really quickly. But for most service-based businesses, the goal isn't impressions, clicks, it's leads. And more specifically, it's qualified leads that turned into booked appointments, a booked job, or revenue. So when you are looking at your data, run everything through that one question. Is this helping me get more of the right leads at a cost that makes sense for my business? Because a campaign can look great on the surface and still not be doing its job. So you might have a high click-through rate, but nobody's converting. Or you might have a lot of conversions, but they're all junk leads. You might have cheap clicks coming from people who were never going to become customers in the first place. So before you change a single thing, remind yourself what you're actually trying to accomplish. Let's hop into a screen share and analyze an account together. So the next thing to look at is the time frame that you're dialed into. So a lot of people will check their campaigns day by day, and there's nothing wrong with that. I do the same thing, checking performance from one day to the next. But you don't want to make a big high-level decision based off of one day's worth of data. So Google Ads can swing drastically from one day to the next, especially if it is a new campaign and on smart bidding. So you might notice that one day it spends double your budget and you might get a few more conversions, and then another day it doesn't spend really anything at all. The impressions are a lot lower, and that's the smart bidding doing its thing. And so you don't want to base a high-level decision on whether you should pause something or change something based off of one day's worth of data. You ideally want a longer time frame. And so I like to start with about a 30-day window period. So I'll just go the last 30 days here. And that gives you a much truer picture of the average of what is happening within the account. Now, obviously, if you made a recent change and you want to see the effects that that change had, then you can dial it in. So if I made a change on June 10th, then I would dial it in from the 11th onwards to see what effect that change has had so far. But for the bigger calls, like whether a campaign is working or whether something should be paused or whether to shift budget, zoom out a little bit and look at it at a longer period. So once your time frame is set, then the first thing you want to check is whether the campaign is even running. So you want to make sure that it's getting impressions. It is. You want to make sure it's getting clicks. It is. And you want to make sure it's getting conversions. It is. Perfect. Awesome. If the campaign isn't getting any impressions at all, then something is preventing the ad from being eligible to even enter the auctions. So that could be a setup issue or a billing issue, a policy issue, or something wrong with how you have set it up. So maybe your keywords are too tight, or maybe you have a max CPC that is limiting things, or a target CPA that is drastically limiting things. For some reason, there is something preventing it from entering the auctions, and so that needs to be dealt with pretty quickly if it's not getting any impressions. I will say, if it is a brand new campaign and you just launched it, sometimes it can take a few days for impressions to show in the account. So if it is a brand new account, a brand new campaign, and it is only day 1 or day 2, I wouldn't panic too much and start changing everything. But if you're on day 4 or 5 still with no impressions, then maybe start tweaking things to start to get some impressions. So then from there, the next metric I look at is usually the click-through rate. Your click-through rate tells you how often people see your ad and then actually click on it. So if 100 people are seeing your ad and 7 click on your ad, then that is a 7% click-through rate. Now, every industry is a little bit different on what the average click-through rate is. You can look that up online just by Googling it. WordPress has all of those KPIs listed. Personally, I like to see that number around at least a 6 to 7%. So this campaign here is drastically lower than that, still drastically lower, and that is what I am actively working on to try to increase. That being said, we'll come back to it later, but the click-through rate is low, but the conversion rate is above average. So the people that are clicking are converting and are booking appointments. So a low click-through rate, so below that 6 or 7%, that usually means that there is a disconnect somewhere between what the searcher wanted and what your ad is saying. So the person searched for something, your ad showed up, and then they kept scrolling. So something about your ad didn't feel relevant enough to have them click on it. So when that happens, there are two places that I will generally look. And the first is the search term report. So if I click into the campaign, and then under Insights and Reports, you can go to Search Terms. So this is where I will always usually start if that click-through rate is low, because if Google is showing your ad to the wrong searches, even the best ad copy in the world is not going to save us. So the search term reports show the actual things that people typed into Google that triggered our ad. And we want to make sure what our ad is being triggered for is relevant to what we are offering. And so this is where you will find out if your ads are being matched up with the right intent. So let's say in this campaign, it's an automotive repair shop. So somebody searches for car repair near me. That person obviously wants a mechanic, brakes, engine, diagnostic, tire, something mechanical with their car. But depending on the match types that we're using, Google might match that search to something more like car detailing. So now this person has searched for car repair and they're looking at an ad about car detailing. Chances are they're not going to click on that ad. And if they do click, the chances of them converting are even lower. And so that's why the search term reports are so important. So go through your report, find things that don't pertain, and then exclude them. So for this account, if our ad keeps showing up for collision or detailing or waxing, then I would go in, like I've done here, and add those in as negative. So you can just click it off, add as negative. And this will help Google understand who you do and do not want to be seeing your ad. So then it helps to focus your budget back on the people who actually want what you are offering. That's a first big takeaway. Now, let's say we go through this report and everything looks really good. Searches are relevant, the intent makes sense, people are searching for the services that we actually offer. But your click-through rate is still relatively low. And so that's when I would start looking at the ad copy. Because at that point, the issue may be that your ad just isn't matching the search closely enough, or it's just not giving people a strong enough reason to click. So this is really common when you've crammed too many different services into one ad group. So again, with the auto repair, if I go to my ad groups here, you can see that I did have separate ad groups for different services. They have since been paused. But if you have one ad group for all of these terms, tires, brakes, AC, your general car repair near me, it's nearly impossible to write an ad copy that speaks to all of those services and make it relevant to the searcher. So instead, what you want to do is separate those out by themes. And then that makes it so that your ad copy can speak more directly to the theme of that ad group. So if someone searching for brake repair near me wants to see brakes in the ad copy. Someone searching for new tires near me wants to see tires in the ad copy. So if all of those keywords live in one ad group, your ad copy starts to get watered down to cover everything. And broad ad copy just does not feel as relevant. So if you do have one ad group currently that has all of those different themes together, then the fix is usually to split those into different ad groups. So in this case, I would have one for general car repair, one for brake repair, one for tires, one for AC. Now all of our keywords and our ad copy and the search intent can all line up a lot more tightly through that customer's journey. So then the brake repair ad can talk about brake inspections, brake pads, brake replacements, and scheduling. And then the tire ad can talk about tire replacement, new tires, used tires, installation, all that stuff. And this gives the searcher a much clearer match between what they typed into the search bar and what your ad says. And as soon as that matches up, that tends to lift your click-through rate because the ad finally feels relevant to what that person is searching for. And then another thing to check on would be the ad copy side, whether it's just gone stale or whether you need to do more A/B testing or split testing or pause an underperforming ad. So to do that, I would just click on the ads right below, and then you can go through by ad group, and it will show you the ad. So you can see I've done some split testing. I have one paused here. It was underperforming. And I am testing now 2 new ones. So with ad copy, I like to look at even a longer data period than say 30 days. Now these 2 ad copies, one of them is relatively new. So we are still in the testing phase. So it doesn't have 60 or 90 days worth of data to look at. But once we get there, what I'm looking for is there a clear winner? Is there one ad that clearly has a higher click-through rate, that is getting more of the conversions, that has a significantly lower cost per click? And so if that is the case, once the time comes, then I will pause the underperforming ad, duplicate the winner, and continue testing. I have a whole video about A/B testing, split testing, and ad copy that I did a few weeks ago, so I will link that below if you want more information on how to split test ad copy. So then after this, the next thing that I would look at the campaign level is your conversions and your conversion rate. Because with this client, especially, clicks are not our goal, leads are our goal, booked appointments are the goal. So our conversion rate tells us how many people clicked on the ad and then took action. So whether that action is filling out a form, calling the business, booking an appointment, requesting a quote, whatever it is that we have set as our main conversion action. And just like click-through rate, conversion benchmarks vary a lot by industry. So example, this automotive repair shop, the average conversion rate for an auto repair shop, I believe, is 12 to 13%. Whereas for something like a medical practice, that would be lower significantly, probably around like 5%. So I wouldn't just grab one universal benchmark and go with it. Do Google what your KPIs are for your industry, so it gives you a better idea on how your campaign is performing to industry standards. So if our conversion rate was low, that usually means that there's a disconnect somewhere after that person clicked on the ad. So they saw our ad, they clicked on it. So something about that ad was interesting enough to get their attention and get them to our site, but then they didn't convert. And so that can mean a few different things. It could still be the search term problem, because if the person wasn't really looking for what you offer, they'll click sometimes and then realize that that's not what they're looking for and then go back. But if your search terms look good and your click-through rate is good, then a low conversion rate usually points to either a conversion tracking issue or a landing page issue. And so the very first thing you want to slow down and check is your conversion tracking. Absolutely. If your conversion tracking is not set up properly, or if it is not triggering properly, then all of the data that you are seeing is wildly off. So you might be thinking that your campaign is failing, it's not getting you conversions, but if Google can't track those conversions anyways, then it could be that you are getting traffic, Google is just not registering it. And so the main issue with not having it set up is that Google doesn't really know what to optimize towards, and so it starts to guess. Whereas when you have your conversion tracking set up properly, it knows what it is optimizing towards, and it will go find more of those actions. So the first thing to check on conversion tracking is everything being tracked as it should be? Are you tracking phone calls if you accept phone calls? Are you tracking form fills? Are you tracking booked appointments? Is the campaign set up to track those? So if you set up the conversion tracking after you set up the campaign, sometimes the campaign is not tracking those action items. So if you go into your campaign settings under conversion goals, you can see what it is optimizing towards. And so if your conversion goals are not listed there, then that campaign is not tracking those or optimizing towards those. So that's another thing to check as well. But if the tracking is set up properly, then the next place to look would be the landing page. So back to our brake repair example, if someone searches brake repair near me and your ad talks about brake repair and they click on it, so far everything lines up. But then they land on a page that it either loads slowly or it doesn't clearly explain what the service is, or it doesn't make it obvious how to book or contact you, or it dumps them on a generic homepage where they have to figure it all out themselves. That all will wreck your conversion rate, because people are not that patient. They clicked because they want something specific. And if that page doesn't confirm that they're in the right place and show them very clearly what to do next, then they'll bounce right back to Google and go to the next person. So if your click-through rate is good, but your conversion rate is low, it usually means the problem isn't getting people interested. They've already clicked, but something on the page is making them not want to complete the conversion action. So then from here, once we looked at the campaign at a high level as a whole, then we can move down into the ad groups. And then I usually analyze the ad groups the same way. So are they getting impressions? No, these ones are not because they're paused. Are they getting clicks and are they getting conversions? But we ask everything in a slightly different way. So our main concern is which ad groups are actually pulling their weight. Inside one campaign, we might have several ad groups like I did have here, and they won't all perform the same. So one might be driving the majority of the conversions. As you can see, that is what is happening here. Our general ad group is driving all of the conversions, but another ad group may be spending a lot of money and not getting any conversions at all. And so that's the main thing we want to look at. Is there an ad group that is spending a lot of money, not bringing in conversions, or is the cost per conversion really, really high? So for example, let's say this AC, if our cost per conversion was 46 is okay for this business for an AC lead. Now, it's not getting a ton of impressions. We'll get back to that in a second, but if that cost per conversion didn't make sense, if it was up in like the 80s or 90s, then I would probably pause that ad group. And that's what I did with the tires and the brakes. It was just the cost per conversion was getting too high. And the leads that they were getting from those conversions were lower quality than the ones that they were getting from our general car repair near me type of keywords. The other thing you want to look at is there one ad group that is eating the majority of the budget and not letting the other ad groups perform? And this tends to happen a lot with multiple ad groups in one campaign. So Google tends to funnel most of the budget toward the most searched ad group. So in this example, we had a general, a brakes, a tires, and an AC. And so Google was funneling majority of the cost to our general, and the brake and the tires just wasn't getting enough impressions and enough cost to really make an impact. And we can see that that's what's happening with the AC as well. So the impressions are significantly lower in the AC one, but the cost is also significantly lower. So Google is funneling the majority of our campaign budget to this general ad group because it knows that that ad group gets more searches, going to get us more clicks, and that's what Google wants. It wants more clicks on our ads. So in this case, one of the options of what I could do is I could pull this AC ad group out into its own campaign. And so I would pause it, put it in its own campaign, give it its own budget and its own chance to run. It allows it to collect more data and actually prove what it can do. Because right now, chances are it's being bottlenecked because all of the cost is going to the general ad group. So when you're looking at your ad groups, yes, you want to still look at your click-through rates, your conversion rate, and your conversions, but you also want to look at the cost and how much cost is being allocated to each ad group, because that will tell you how much of a chance each of the ad groups has actually had to run and whether that budget split matches what you want for the business. And so then after ad groups, you can look the same evaluation process under your ads. So then you would click on ads and it shows you your ads. So then you can look at the click-through rate, the cost per conversion, your conversion rate, your conversions, and see if there is one ad that is significantly underperforming, and then pause it and continue with your split testing. So ad testing isn't necessarily about writing a bunch of versions of different ads and hoping that one sticks. It's about reading the data and what the data is asking you or telling you, and then leaning into that. So maybe you need to switch up the offer. Maybe the offer needs to be clearer. So maybe the headline needs to match the search more closely. Maybe the call to action needs more of a punch. But the point isn't to change things at random. It's to let the data guide you to your next test. And then the last major area to analyze is your keywords. And so if I come down to audiences, keywords, and content, I can go into keywords. And with keywords, you're really looking for anything that isn't pulling its weight. Is there a keyword that is spending a lot but not generating conversions? Are there keywords that have a really low click-through rate? Which ones have a really high cost per lead? Sometimes a keyword looks great in theory and just doesn't bring in good leads in practice. So maybe it attracts too many low intent searches. Maybe it gets clicks but no conversions, or maybe it's just hogging all of the budget that would be better off spent on other keywords. So for instance, I'm gonna sort by cost per conversion. So there is this one keyword that is $70 and has only gotten one conversion. Now that's over the past 30 days. We can go back a little bit further and see it's dropped significantly, whereas this one is significantly higher. So that's one of the reasons why I like to look at things at a longer data period as well, because like I said, things change from one week to the next, one day to the next. So the longer data period that you can look at, the better. If I was looking at this car repair Hollywood over the last 30 days, I probably would have paused that keyword, but the previous 30 days, it was significantly lower. So we're going to keep testing it. So if a keyword has a low click-through rate, a high cost per conversion, and only a handful of conversions, it may be worth pausing that ad. And by pausing the weak ones, we are freeing up more of our budget to go to the stronger working ones. And that's the whole point when it comes to keywords. We're not trying to keep necessarily every single keyword alive. We're trying to make sure that the budget is flowing toward the searches that are most likely to bring in good leads. So when you're analyzing your Google Ads campaign, don't just open the account and start changing things. Follow the data in order. And once you've gone through all of those steps that we've just talked about, the big thing to remember is that your data is almost always pointing you towards a next step. If your search terms are irrelevant, you probably need negative keywords. If one keyword is spending a lot and not converting, you may need to pause it. If your clicks look good, but your conversions are low, you probably need to either check your tracking or your landing page. But if your search terms are relevant, your campaign is showing, and people still aren't clicking or converting the way that they should, then the next thing to look at is your ad copy. Sometimes the problem isn't who you're showing up for, it's what you're saying when you do show up. And so that's where split testing comes in. So if you want to know how to write stronger ad copy, how to test the different headlines and descriptions, and how to tell which version is actually working, click right here to watch my video on ad copy and split testing. And I'll see you over there.